So I'm going to talk about the 3 ways to harness your greatness. It's imperative these days. In this day and age, everybody's feeling stressed. There's so much pressure. There are so many uncertainties of the future. And this may happen in your relationships. It may actually happen in your workplace. It may happen in your business. It may even happen in your family. Those kinds of challenges, no doubt, are difficult, but they are necessary as part of growth. As you probably would have discovered by now, without those kinds of obstacles, you would never be able to be forced or nudged into leaning into your own greatness. I personally believe that everybody has their mark of greatness. You do, I do, and what I've learned the hard way is that there are many things that we have not learned to leave behind in our pursuit of greatness. Well, the first one is that we need to learn to enhance our meta skills. Now, I know that sounds a little bit odd. It's like, what in the world is a meta skill? There's metacognition, meta-emotion, meta-learning, meta-knowledge. All of these elements of meta mean that it is above. So instead of just knowing, how about knowing about your knowing? You see, whenever you do any form of learning, there are principles. And if you understand those principles, learning the next thing becomes much easier. It's almost as if learning one thing makes learning the other thing faster, easier, and more accessible. But most people don't look at skills development that way. As long as you don't have meta skills, every new piece of learning is going to seem like you're starting from zero, and that ultimately sucks. So that's the first way, which is to enhance your meta skills. The next way is to release obstacles. Now, to be able to release your obstacles is no easy feat. You first need to accept that those are obstacles, and anyone with a big ego is not going to be able to do that. Secondly, you need to be somewhat self-aware, and unfortunately a lot of people who don't fit into the criteria of greatness really don't have a sense of self-awareness. That is a bit of a pity. If you already recognize that you have certain obstacles and you're willing to take responsibility for that, then the rest is really easy. You take responsibility, you learn the meta skills, you apply them. Unfortunately, the old way is people start looking for problems, right? It's like, you have to go for therapy, you have to go for counseling. But is that really necessary? As far as I've seen, and I'm a psychotherapist, most people don't really need therapy. They may need some occasional therapeutic help. And therapeutic help does not equate to psychotherapy. In fact, as a psychotherapist myself, I found that releasing obstacles is merely about getting a new perspective on that issue. So things like emotions. Why do we get into negative emotions? Why do we get into negative thinking? It's because we're holding on to a particular perspective, and therefore the obstacle is in our way. Conversely, you can start learning about that emotion. You can learn about that negative thought that will then enable you to exploit the use of meta skills in order to release that emotion or that negative thought. In my opinion, I believe that obstacles are present only because they have a purpose. And once you recognize and lean into that purpose, you will be free. Releasing obstacles does not necessarily mean that you'll eventually get to where you need to go. It's not just about releasing all obstacles, it's about releasing the right kind of obstacles. Because truth be told, there are some obstacles that should be in your way. For example, you want to create an obstacle for procrastination. You want to create an obstacle for wasting time. You want to create an obstacle for thinking poorly about yourself. Many of these obstacles ought to be created. So releasing the right kinds of obstacles is very appropriate in a sense that now, with a corridor toward your success, you now know where to go and what to avoid. The third thing is a very special category of obstacles that I thought I should take out for itself, which is known as the assumptions and the limiting beliefs that you have. Now, all of us have assumptions about things. Unfortunately, most of those assumptions are not conscious. They are unconscious. And as a meta skills coach, what I do is to help to bring out those assumptions so that we can really look at it and study it. Are they useful for us? Are they not useful for us? Let me give you a simple illustration. When I was much younger, as a trainer, I would charge $500 a day. But I felt that that was because I wasn't good enough. Over a course of time, my skill sets went up and I started charging $3,000 a day, and I thought that was the good market rate. Unfortunately, I suddenly realized there were people charging $10,000 a day and were not as proficient as I was. And therefore, it came to strike me as a belief breaker, an assumption breaker. As a result, I began to take a look at the fees that I was charging and then apply it accordingly. Eventually, what took place was nothing short of phenomenal, and that's one of the reasons why I have my successes today, by looking at the assumptions and then leaning into a new assumption about my future. And I believe that you can do that as well. Imagine what it would be like for all of your old limiting assumptions to be replaced with more empowering ones. How different would your life be? If you think about people such as Roger Bannister, for example, he broke the limit of the 4-minute mile simply by deciding to structure something and to build towards that structure, and that's why he had progress. The next year, over 200 people broke that same record. Now the question then is, why do we need to wait for a Roger Bannister to break the limits of the world? Why do you need to wait for somebody to break those limits? It's because you don't see it. You don't know how to do those structures. You don't know how to do those benchmarks. And truth be told, you're probably benchmarking against something very, very inappropriate. For example, you might have a benchmark salary of $50,000 and you never thought that you can benchmark at $500,000 because the world has told you that $50,000 is appropriate for your kind of profession. And then you don't think about pivoting towards entrepreneurship because it feels too scary. Do you hear the assumptions and the limitations? Do you hear the lack of meta skills and knowledge there? At the end of the day, this is critical because a lot of your assumptions about your business, if you're an owner of a business that is making 5 million, I'm pretty sure you will be able to hit 4 times or 5 times that amount if you learn the meta skills in order for you to move that needle. It's probably because of an assumption you've made and a limitation of how you think. To be able to release these limitations, you need a form of meta skill that will enable you to recognize it, to be able to understand how you came to think about this, and then to loosen that set of assumptions so that you can see the world very differently. After all, as I mentioned before, an obstacle or a problem is only there because of the way you're viewing it. So if you've always thought of yourself as a particular type of person, maybe it's because of that perspective that's keeping the results the way that they are. So one of the things that I've learned about greatness comes from a man called Ted Nicholas. He's a copywriter. He achieved his millions at the age of 19. He's in his 80s right now. And one of the things that he mentioned when I asked him for advice, I asked him, Ted, you know, you're so successful, you've accomplished so many things and so much in such an illustrious span of your career. What kind of advice would you give to young entrepreneurs who are up and coming? And he said this, Stuart, all entrepreneurs need to upgrade their belief to the level of their expectation. Well, that kind of blew me away. After all, whatever it is that we believe in, we need to recognize that our expectation is actually what we want. But we may have limiting beliefs, and you need to be able to discard those limiting beliefs in order for you to really elevate yourself into greatness, isn't it? So if the assumptions and beliefs keep sticking around, then you're just going to be banging into a brick wall. Every time you attempt to do something great, you feel that it is insufficient and you're not good enough. Is that really going to get you to where you want to go? You need to understand how beliefs work. You need to understand how to undo poor or inferior belief systems. You need to therefore galvanize internal resources so that you'll be able to make your brain your companion towards your greatness and success rather than stay the same and remain in mediocre results. At the end of the day, it is not about me being the coach for every single skill. It's about me being the coach that enables your skills to acquire other skills. Many of my coachees have accomplished their greatness through this. Whether it's weight loss, I've got clients who've, within the span of 6 weeks, lost 6 kilograms, utilizing a very simple set of meta skills. Being aware of their nutrition, knowing how to target their nutrition, knowing how to target their hunger pangs so that they don't go overboard, and recognize and become more self-aware of their own internal workings. Simple, but yet if you don't know the mechanics of how to do it, it's going to stymie your progress. One of my other coaching clients who happens to be a really great salesperson, but obviously you can't sell everything yourself. You need a team. And unfortunately, one of the things that was lacking was not her ability to teach, nor was it her ability to sell, it was her ability to rally a team together, right? In order for her to be able to rally this team together, she needed meta skills. And as a result, she just texted me. She said that was the best day of sales ever with the smallest team ever. And that says a lot. Another person who happened to be a parent, but also a senior leader, completely lost in terms of how to motivate his child. And yet, through the coaching process, came to become aware of his assumptions about his child. And that came to become one of the most important release points, turning points in the relationship between himself and his son. And that also enabled him to take responsibility for the greatness that he ought to lean into, not just because he was a senior leader, but because he ought to become a senior leader back at home too. So all of this is transition. In order for you to get from point A to point B, you need to learn the way of your transition. How are you going to walk through that difficult period? How are you going to walk through that sense of uncertainty, that feeling that I may not be able to accomplish this because I don't know where I'm going? And the answer is in the meta skills. In the description down below, you'll have a link. This link will bring you to a form that you can fill in if you're interested to find out more about how you can elevate your life, bring yourself to greatness, and to be able to lean into that greatness that I know is already within you. If you find that you're in transition, if you find that you're missing something in life and you want to get to the next level, fill up that form. Let's have a conversation.